Know what to eat, but find yourself not eating it. Perhaps you've been on diets and off again and just wonder why you can't stick to them. The Eating For You podcast, hosted by me, Sally-Anne Pisk, will show you what's been missing so you can enjoy a healthier way of eating that lasts. It's Sally-Anne here, and it's my great pleasure to be celebrating the International Day of Yoga with Malati Mehrish. Welcome, Malati, to the Eating For You podcast.
Thank you, Sally-Anne. It's lovely getting in touch and discussing yoga on such a special day like Yoga Day. And yoga encompasses many parts of life, which we can really get into as we go through our discussion.
Yes, and we will. Just before we get going, though, I'd just like to give our listeners and viewers some background to your embracing of yoga. Malati is the head of yoga and meditation at Ananda in the Himalayas, which is an award-winning Ayurvedic retreat centre and spa near Rishikesh in northern India. Malati has been a yoga practitioner for over 2 decades and has a commitment to bringing alive the science of yoga for health, harmony, positivity, and fulfillment. She studied many courses at Bihar School of Yoga and has experience teaching groups, individuals, schools, sports people, business owners, children, seniors, and people with terminal illnesses. She also anchored outreach programs for yoga across Karnataka, a southern state of India, and she has also compiled and edited books on yoga. Today we'll be exploring the benefits of yoga and how it integrates with nutrition and our food choices. I am excited to have you here, Malati, as a guest because I got my first experience of yoga while I was a guest at Ananda. And the yoga teachers were just so supportive in helping me integrate yoga into my day. And I'll certainly share some of my experiences of yoga and its benefits through our discussion today. So to get started, let us know how you started your career in yoga.
I would actually say it's more than a career for me. It's been a calling. I had a regular kind of an education and finished up with an MBA, which is kind of the thing that everybody gravitated towards at my time and even continues to be the way today. But somewhere in that corporate career, I felt that I just didn't fit in. And I was married by then and I had kids. And I went to meet a teacher just by chance. And she was from the Bihar School of Yoga. I started class just as a normal yoga class. But slowly it just started to expand into my life and added that missing part. It was like it gave me roots gave me roots for my existence. It gave me purpose beyond just having a job and now bringing up a family. I could see an evolution of myself, finding an authentic side of me, which I think all of us, beyond social constructs, beyond the roles that we play as women, beyond what we're expected to be, gives you fulfillment finally at the end of the day. So that's really what brought me to yoga.
Yes. So it's interesting that you talk about that missing piece and then, that fulfillment that yoga has brought to you, because I noticed that really stood out to me when I was reading your bio on the Ananda website. And I think what's interesting about yoga is it is very much a personal path, isn't it? In terms of how we find that fulfillment or what we've been looking for. What has your experience been as a teacher of yoga in helping people along that journey?
I think first to put it in the right context, yoga isn't exercise. Yoga is being able to tune into your body, tune into your breathing, and tune into your mind. It's, think about it. 5,000 years ago, yogis in India were on a quest, and the quest was for truth. They kind of dedicated their entire lives. And in those days, it wasn't an economy that ran on a capitalistic base. It was more about purpose, like even when you look at the philosophers in Greece, they worked for a purpose. So they researched yoga for what it authentically was,
Yeah.
a way to find the truth of existence.
Mm.
And today, just to give you a little paradox, today yoga is done in a studio in front of a mirror where you're supposed to be turning inwards, not outwards. Now, that's an irony, isn't it?
Yes.
So the answers are within,
Yes.
and yoga gives you the ability to dive not just into the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious, and the various layers that are kind of holding us in a pattern.
Mm.
And so it's not for one person, it's for everybody. That's the beauty of yoga. Yoga is not if you can stand on your head for 5 minutes or be a rubber band. Yoga is about discovering you. And
Yeah.
really, honestly, it's it's a time tested, now scientifically proven way. And I'm sure you can kind of testify to that, or tell us that, because you've come to Ananda and seen that authentic yoga is very different from what's kind of left the shores of India. And let's say there's no judgment on it, but there comes a time when you need to look at the whole of the science. It's like learning geography from a textbook and imagining what Australia looked like versus going there.
Yes.
So it's take the journey, get there and see what's there.
Yeah, and it is too. And I think the first thing that struck me about how yoga, as in the asanas, are taught at Ananda was that it's about doing what your mind and body can do, and it's very personalized. My experience before that had been larger yoga classes where the idea was you just had to do what the teacher was telling you. And as you were just mentioning, it was about making sure you got the shapes and the postures right. Even if your poor body was not like a rubber band, it was more like a, steel peg, like it was very, how can I say, it was the opposite to what yoga really should bring us, which is that joy and that sense of confidence and self confidence. It was more about, oh, I'm just no good at this. And literally, I had never pursued yoga in that way, in terms of that physical aspect of the yoga, because I couldn't do it. I couldn't keep up with the class and so forth. And it was a very big class, so you didn't get that personal supervision. Whereas the way it's taught in Ananda is literally one thing at a time. And you may just have, if we want to call it for simplicity, 5 exercises or 5 moves to start with. And that is really getting in contact with your mind and body and sort of easing into it rather than trying to force yourself into it, I suppose is the best way I could explain it. And just
True.
before I let you, sort of follow on from that, the other thing I was thinking of before our call today was that I also saw how the practice, the different breathing practices and also meditation then came together with the actual movement. And I suppose coming from a background of mindfulness, it's very much a mindful movement. It's not about flexibility. It's not about what I look like. It's about just moving with ease in your body.
And in your mind and in your breath.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. What we teach at Ananda is actually traditional yoga, and this tradition goes back 5,000 years. So when we say it's scientific, mindfulness has become such a buzzword, but that was really what the yogis wanted us to do. In classical yoga, you don't open your eyes, you do the asana in with your eyes closed, because the asana is internalizing you. It's taking you within. You start to become aware of what your body is doing. For example, if you were to do a forward bend,
Yeah.
you're no longer facing the world. You're folding
Yes.
and you're introvert.
Yeah.
A backward bend is extroverting you.
Yeah.
So it's opening you out to the world.
Mm.
So you see, somewhere the core thought of the asana is lost. And do you know that when the yogis actually discovered these asanas, they would stay in them for 5, 10, 15, and the more advanced they got, the more they stayed in it. So
Mm.
if you were to just put your head down and stay there, your mind would automatically just calm down. It's not about the sequence. It's not about putting your body through something. The yogi in the cave who was doing yoga didn't have a mirror to see what he was doing. He had to see it from inside.
Yeah.
So it develops an inner vision. What that means is that I start to read my body, not with language, but with an inner knowing. So the asana becomes a medium of connecting. So I breathe, let's say I do a posture. I breathe in and I'm folding forward and touching my toes.
Mm.
I feel the stretch in my back. So my mind's connected to my back.
Mm.
I'm breathing deeper, and as I breathe longer and deeper, I may not touch my toes, but the effect of the asana will remain the same. It's not about the perfect posture, it's about understanding the principle behind it, which gives an outcome. So, the progression of asana really is from dynamic to static. And
Mm.
as your consciousness becomes more and more stable, you will find the ability to sit longer, stay in a pose longer naturally, not by forcing it. So, the first principle in yoga is never create a kind of a dissonance between body and mind. So, your mind's projecting that I want to look like this, and your body's like, I don't think I can do that.
Mm.
And then you come away from the class saying, what am I doing to myself?
That's
You know,
right.
instead of getting it together, you're kind of creating a schism. You're separating body and mind. So, in reality, yoga is to bring you to that state where you start harmonizing. Now, what does the bend do? When I'm bending forward, I'm kind of applying pressure on the abdominal region, stretching the back of my body. So, my spine is elongating.
Yeah.
Throughout the day, gravity is pulling you down. You're stretching, you're doing the counter move. And each set of asanas has a purpose.
Mm.
Inversions, for example, reverse the circulation of blood throughout the body and gives a reverse pull to the organs, especially for women, not in that time of the month.
Yeah.
To do an inversion tones the entire reproductive region. It tones the digestion. Imagine everything just getting pulled out and you're reversing. When you really start seeing the
Mm.
dimension from which yoga is taught, then you will understand what the asana is for. When
Mm.
you do a twist, for example, we store a lot of tension in our backs because we're facing the world forward and
Mm.
it all goes and sits in our back. So when you twist, you're like wringing out your spine and back like a cloth.
Yeah.
So the tension gets squeezed out. So you
Mm.
see little things when you start understanding the principle of what yoga is for.
Mm.
And all of that prepares you. Now you've connected your body and your mind and your breath. It prepares you for the next step, which
Mm.
is taking that awareness. It's not on the mat, it's taking it out.
Yes.
Something comes at you through your senses.
Mm.
You can step back for a moment, breathe, and respond to it rather than react. So,
Yes.
yoga is not about what you do on the mat, it's what you learn on the mat and how you bring it into life to bring it alive. And therefore, yoga is known as a vidya. Vidya translates as a living science. The more you live it, the more you understand it.
Yes.
So, it becomes a living, breathing way of
Yes.
being.
Yes. And it reminds me of a situation. One of my past work experiences was helping a fairly new health retreat get set up. And we had a practitioner come in who was Indian trained. And she was quite shocked. She was quite new to Australia at how limited the concept of yoga had become in Australia. And she spoke very much about it being a way of life. And I could relate to that. And as you said, and I love the way you explained it, it's quite true that the asanas not only bring you in contact with your body, but with your mind as well. And it's like a gateway for some people. Some people find it difficult to sit down and just start meditating. But once they start getting at least back home in the body, so their thoughts are coming into the body, then meditation becomes a little bit easier for them afterwards as well. It's just that awareness, I think, isn't it?
You know, I really want to add one thing here,
Yeah.
but everybody forgets they want to jump into meditation. It's like jumping into the deep end of the pool without learning to swim.
That's a lovely way of putting it as well, because I can still remember, I wouldn't say it was traumatic, but I can still remember one of my first experience of meditation. I mean, I had a very good teacher, having said that, but the way my mind and body responded to it, it was rebirth is not the
Revolt.
right word. It wasn't the right
Revolt?
What was that?
A revolt?
Not a revolt, actually. It was more of a release, I think.
Please. Okay.
Yes. And I think that was again more just that time in my life, how out of touch I had become with stress, how stress was impacting my mind and body. And so it was like, for me, it was like a coming home more than, like wanting to fight what was going on. It was like, oh, I'm supposed to feel relaxed. I'm supposed to feel calm. And that's the natural state. I'm not supposed to feel uptight and stressed and
Hmm.
cranky all the time. So, but I hear what you say, because a lot of people will say to me, why is it when I first start to meditate, I have all these thoughts and my mind is so busy? And I say, well, it's always like that. We just haven't taken notice.
So I actually want to bring you to exactly that point.
Yeah.
You see, in yoga, they've studied the physiology at great depth and intricacy to
Mm.
understand the state and rate of your breathing relates to the number of thoughts you have.
Yes.
So that's why they say when you get angry, take 10 deep breaths before
Yeah.
you say anything.
Mm.
There are subtle truths hidden in
Yeah.
all languages. You just
Yeah.
have to discover the principle behind it. So
Yes.
in yoga, the way you breathe relates to the amount of thoughts you have. And your thoughts are not a layer, they're like a multi-story building.
Mm.
Because when you wake up in the morning without even getting conscious, you know that you need to go to your bathroom and you know which way to go to the bathroom. Where did that come from? So your mind's already functioning. So when you meditate, obviously you're going to see not one, but layers. The other thing is
Yeah.
the rate and state of your breathing very clearly makes the density of thoughts more. When you're under stress or you're working and you're multitasking, you're
Mm.
moving from one to the other, to the other, to the other. So it's become a pattern for all of us. I mean, young or old, I think technology has just put us in that box. What yoga is saying is learn to breathe through the asana, through the breathing techniques, which then brings you to a point where you slow down. So let's just understand the physiology of this a bit. We breathe approximately 15 breaths in a minute, about 900 times an hour, 21,600 times a day. It's documented,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah.
And as you get more stressed, it goes up to 20 breaths, which means that you are breathing really short and shallow, which
Mm.
means your breath is really making your mind race. It's
Mm.
like, you're being chased by a tiger and not
Yes.
literally, but
I know.
figuratively.
Yes. Yes.
So the thoughts are like the tiger's chasing you. So as soon as you sit down, obviously they're going to jump out and say they're there because you start noticing them. So the main thing to get to the meditative awareness is to learn to breathe in the natural, proper manner where it moves from the autonomic nervous system to the conscious breathing, which makes all the difference with your meditation.
Yeah. No, thank you for explaining that. It's a lovely way to explain in many ways how the body and our feeling of stress is impacting our breathing, but then how the breathing can actually relax and calm our mind. So it's this little dance, really. And if we can find that practice or that way of incorporating, as I call complete breathing or deeper breathing, then it can help us stay calm.
To add to that, the partner in that dance is your senses
Yeah, yeah,
with the breath.
yeah.
You're dancing. So it depends on, are you doing the trot? Are you doing the waltz?
Yes,
It depends on what you're doing.
yeah.
But really coming back to the practical applications, I was just watching the French Open, and Djokovic is a great one for breathing. And I've actually worked with professional tennis athletes
Mm,
and seen how we can change their reaction. Because imagine for them, it's compressed.
mm,
In that moment, they need to make the right decision to
mm.
win that match.
Yes,
Everything rides on it. And
yes.
at that point, you can't use your mind because your mind's all over. It's
Mm,
the breath that you return to. Just to give you, I mean, how Djokovic has been so successful, and this is a well-published, documented, and reported. It's this important piece of the puzzle. One is, of course, how we do asanas. And the second is, are we even acknowledging the fact that if we don't breathe, we don't live, and if we breathe well, we live well? It's
yes.
really simple and profound and very powerful.
Yes, yes. No, I love that, Malati. And I think you've mentioned some of this already. We've spoken about the origins of yoga and how it was a way for the yogis to find their meaning of life, their purpose in life. And then out in the West, my first experience of yoga was very much about looking good in the mirror, as you put it, or not looking good in the mirror. What other sort of misconceptions have you come across that people have about yoga?
Oh, there are many, many, but we stick to the main ones. There's so many.
Right.
But
Okay. Yeah.
there are not forms of yoga. There are traditions of yoga. The
Mm,
Hatha Yoga, the body movement, deals with the energetics and the body. Raja Yoga deals, it's a branch, deals with the mind.
mm,
Bhakti Yoga deals with emotions. So understanding that it's not about forms, but more about the branches and what you're trying to achieve.
yeah.
Karma Yoga is how we use our energy creatively to
Mm,
clear up our minds. You know, when you are engrossed in, let's say, painting, or maybe if you are service oriented, helping somebody, there's that feeling of fulfillment that comes. That's Karma Yoga. So
yeah.
this is the first misconception that yoga equals asana, meditation, and breathing. Yoga encompasses all of life, from the mind, the emotions, to knowing yourself, all of that. So, really, that's the first big myth I'd like to bust, saying
Yes.
that yoga is a way of life. And there are yogas for every aspect of life. For your dynamic self, it would be like a hatha yoga. For the mental component, it would be meditation and Raja Yoga. For emotions, it would be like chanting of a mantra,
Yes.
sound vibrations. And now sound healing is a very big wave that's coming up, and this is really part of that.
Yes.
Bhakti Yoga. So
Yeah.
these are the various yogas.
Mm,
Second thing is yoga is a form of exercise. No. Yoga is a form of getting in touch with yourself.
yeah.
You know, there are so many people and young people who come to Ananda and they are extremely stressed. And so when I ask them, do you breathe? They said, I think I don't breathe.
Mm,
So imagine that your body at just a physiological level is completely starved of oxygen. So every cell in the body is kind of, crying for
mm,
being oxygenated. So it's not a form of exercise. It's a form of turning your senses inwards and
mm,
using all of that beautiful prana, life force,
yeah.
to nurture every cell, to make you flower, to
Mm,
make you become what your potential is. That's what yoga is. Even in an asana, even in a breath practice, even when you're using your hands, even when you're eating, even
mm,
when you're dancing,
yeah.
that's what yoga is. It's an attitude, it's a way of living.
Mm.
Yoga's for flexible bodies. Really, I mean, that's one that really needs busting because
I'm starting to think it may be more for having a flexible mind, actually, more than a flexible body.
that's beautifully said, Sally Ann. That's absolutely fantastically said because that flexible mind is going to stay with you, from birth till the end of life. That mind is that one constant that we really need to start working with, and yoga is that medium.
Yes.
And yoga is for a child in as much for a senior. So, we in yoga, we say after the age of 65, the prana start depleting in the arms and legs. And therefore, you'll notice that people who are older have weakness in their knees and ankles and joints of the lower body.
Mm,
But look back at any tribals, aborigines, they don't have it because they're always using all their joints to open up and flow the prana. Whereas we are seated at angles,
mm,
blocking that flow.
yes.
So, like for older people, it's very subtle practices of toe bends, ankle bends, knee bends to
Mm,
just flow the prana. Because without life, without breath, there is no life.
no.
And the breath is just the medium that's getting the prana to that part. So
Mm,
it's not for flexible bodies, it's for all bodies, and definitely for a flexible mind, and a beautiful mind, and an open mind, and a whole mind.
yes. Yes. Yeah.
Higher intensity practices give you better results.
Mm,
Au contraire, it's actually exactly the opposite. In
mm,
yoga, more is less is more. More is counterproductive. You see, we are using our bodies in such a heightened manner.
mm,
it's been scientifically proven that we're using up all of the adrenal that we're producing as fast as we can produce it, we're using it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not just for people it's for kids, it's for young adults, it's for working people, it's for middle age people, it's for older people, because we are being overstimulated.
Mm.
Excuse me. In this age of overstimulation, we need to learn to slow it down a bit. Just get the foot off the accelerator
Yes.
and
Yeah.
start connecting.
Yes, and I had this wonderful conversation in one of my group programs I run with women, and one of the ladies has been trying to, with my guidance, to get to the bottom of this afternoon snacking habit because we've looked at, is it boredom? Is it this? And we actually worked out that she's quite tired, and it opened up a discussion in the entire group about we don't actually acknowledge tiredness. It's nearly like a sign of failure, whereas being tired is a natural part of life. And if we are more aware, then we don't allow ourselves to get too zapped, so to speak, too much of a flat battery. And it just made me reflect again how, as you were just saying, we're overstimulated, we're on the go all the time, not realizing, well, we actually have to stop and recharge and nourish ourselves. And it makes total sense. Why would I do a fast yoga practice when my mind's been racing, or I've been literally
All
racing
day.
around doing stuff outside or doing things for mum, or you might have children and you've been up with them, keeping
Or
them.
working.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So we're go, go, go. And yeah, of course, being tired is part of it, and being able to look
Yeah.
after ourselves because of that.
And we need to stop hitting that override button.
That's right. And as you were saying, we talk about adrenal fatigue because we literally have, totally overexpended our reserves as well. So a timely reminder, I think, that we need to stop, we need to pause, we need to nourish ourselves.
There's something in yoga, in the tradition that I follow, it's called the Ananda yoga tradition, which has developed into a system which is very modern.
Mm.
We have the concept of a digital detox.
Yes.
So, one half an hour in a week, if you just stay away from any form of device,
Mm.
it's starting to rewire. We've got completely wired, overwired, and fried. So it's like learning to make the pauses in very small ways. It's like if you're working, obviously you can't do it Monday to Friday,
No.
but Saturday you unwind, meet, catch up, do whatever the socialization. And on Sunday, give yourself that half an hour without the phone. So you will be amazed to know that there are things in yoga that are so lifestyle based that it adds a whole new dimension of awareness to living. So
Yes.
yoga is a way of life.
Yes.
And I also want to say that it's not the hours on the mat, but it's bringing out the awareness into your life.
Yes. Yeah.
And the last thing I'd like to say is that yoga isn't a cult or religion. It's a very scientific method
Mm.
of being able to live a life, as we would say, because yoga has its roots in Sanskrit. Sat, Chit, Ananda, existence, consciousness, and bliss. Because if you look at all of our lives, we have enough and more than enough. And
Yeah.
yet there's so much, a sense of unfulfillment or longing for more. But if we can be in the moment, which is what we call as being mindful,
Yeah.
and have that feeling of completion,
Mm.
it brings you to a state of, it's called Tripti or Ananda, as Ananda in the Himalayas, but
Yes.
it's a state of beatitude.
Mm. Yes. But as you were talking too, I think so many people will say to me that they feel alone. And yet we are so connected these days, with social media and all the wonderful devices that allow us to keep in touch with family and friends all over the world. But I sometimes think that aloneness is, as you have been talking about, that sense of self and the sense of fulfillment that we are okay as we are, and understanding how we live our life to make ourselves feel healthier and happier. That's kind of the two words I often use together, because you can't be truly happy if you're not healthy. And some people go overboard in striving for health, and it becomes a chore, or it becomes nearly like a addiction, and that's not going to make you happy, and it's not going to make you healthy either. It'll actually perhaps send you into that adrenal fatigue as well. So I think, yeah, yoga to me, reflecting now on my own experience, it makes us happy in our own space as well, I feel.
So I'd like to address that thing about being alone. I think technology at some level makes you want to feel connected at a very cerebral, sensorial level. So the learning to disconnect from that sensory stimulation brings you back to yourself. And
Yes,
oftentimes you feel alone because you don't want to look within or be by yourself.
that's right.
But that, if you just turn, and, and in yoga, it's called as pratipaksha bhavana, looking at the opposite, it's time to unwind. Go
Yes.
for a walk on the beach,
Yeah.
you know, feel the wind in your face. We've forgotten these things. We'd rather watch it on a reel. You know,
Yes.
there were times when we would get on a train in India and nobody would know where you are till you reached and
Yeah.
got to a phone where you could call. And
Yes.
today, can you imagine that? That would be like people would probably have, sirens out saying that,
I
where are you? What are
Oh,
you doing?
look, when I was younger, especially in my teenage years, I was very blessed. I've been very blessed to have horses in my life, most of my life. And I used to jump on my horse and go for 8 hours. I lived in a country area.
Wow.
And I think I never told my parents where I was going. I never told them when I'd be back. I would just go. And again, there was no mobile phone back then to, just check in with where I was at. And there was definitely a sense of adventure and a sense of freedom being able to do that. And I also think, again, working a lot in rural areas, when I worked in public health nutrition and community nutrition, I would drive, and we didn't have mobile phones, and it could be several hours before you got to a public telephone box if you needed to call someone. Yeah, so it is nice to actually have those memories. I think some people don't. The younger generations don't. They've had mobile phones maybe since they were 10 years old, and or even younger. Some children, I think.
True that, true that. And
Yeah.
for them, then the digital detox and reconnecting with themselves and yoga starts to play, being mindful starts to play a larger role. And
Yeah.
there is a change in consciousness. I see it at the 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds now, where they consciously want to reduce their time
Yeah.
and find themselves.
That's great.
It's
Is there anything about the different branches of yoga that you would like to share more about in terms of, dealing with our emotions and our mental state and our physical body?
So the movement, it comes from Hatha Yoga, which actually is very energetic. As per the traditional system, our bodies are made up of two energies. The left side of your body is the lunar energy, and the right side of your body is the solar energy. And it maps against physiology because your right brain is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest, and the left brain is the fight or flight.
Yeah.
So you see how the overlays start.
Yeah.
In addition to that, everybody would have heard about chakras, right? Chakras are energy vortices in our body, and these are tied to nerve plexuses and endocrine glands. So when we are actually doing an asana, we are targeting an endocrine gland. Now, why do you relax when you do a forward bend? Is because the abdomen is folding over, your adrenals are getting a little press, the secretion gets reduced. So you're working from an energetic perspective right into a physical one. So asanas done with gentle awareness and breathing and holding are allowing you to manage your physical body, release pain. Pain, according to yoga, is prana that is stuck, energy that is stuck in some part of your body, be it your shoulders, which is most common because you're always on a system,
Yes.
or in the neck or in the bottom of your spine. So that's the physical aspect of it. Then we start learning to breathe, right? Breathing is like setting your mind free from its trap of a list of 1,000 things to do in the day and feeling I didn't accomplish it. But it's just like saying, I'll do my best for today. That attitude comes from learning the karma yoga, because we generate the energy in our body, and how we express that is the yoga of action. So the yoga of practice and the yoga of action. Then we come to the yoga of the mind, Raja, and it's very, very well known across the Western um audiences about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and Raja Yoga. So just to start, where do you think the steering wheel of your mind is?
I've heard this discussed quite a lot, and the steering wheel of the mind, I believe, is in the heart space.
It's right. It's very correct. But let's make the construct.
Yeah.
It's like four wheels which make up your mind, four wheels of the car. You have the sense mind, you have the decision-making mind,
Yes.
and then we have ego, and then we have the memory bank. So these
Yes.
are the four parts of the mind. Or you could see it like a big pie chart. Now, everything that we do gets triggered by the emotion that we feel. You see something, like you see a dead dog, it's straight away repulsion. You see a beautiful flower, it's straight away yes. So it's very much from the heart, but it percolates and expresses through the mind, because our senses, there are motor organs and the perception organs. So we need to learn to manage the mind, the inputs and the outputs
Yes.
in the spectrum of mind management, which means learning to imagine that you're not in the middle of a fist fight, but you're sitting in an armchair and watching what's happening and then saying, okay, I shall see if that's right for me or not.
That's
That's
right.
mind management. It's
Yes.
just kind of giving you the context.
Yes.
Or like,
Yes. And I think the way I like to explain that is in this way, is that whatever's going on, whether it's something, a physical event, it might be people arguing, it might be something on TV, it might be something going on in my own mind. If we're aware of that agitation, perhaps before it takes control of the direction that we choose, if we can just sit back and say, do I need to be involved with this? Is this something I need to be involved with? And that's just something I have found quite beneficial, is to take that pause before we actually react. And I have read in the research papers, there's many ways in which mindfulness helps us become more resilient in many ways, but also less emotional. But taking that pause is critical in allowing us to settle our minds to settle, so we don't actually feel like we've got to take action every time something happens. Another way I talk about it is being a bit of a filter, filtering out things that we don't actually have to react to. So that's sort of an interpretation in a practical sense that I have found quite useful for myself and my
I'd
clients.
like to add to that. So we come to emotion. Emotions are energy in motion. It's what motivates us to go out there and do. So all of these sensorial inputs that we're getting through the mind is creating at the end of the day an emotional imprint.
Yeah.
And it's like this big collection. There's this Disney movie called Inside Out,
Yeah.
and it's an animated movie. It's very cute, but it actually explains, we have these emotions of joy, and they become like conglomerations
Yes.
inside of us. So, it also can come from family patterns. If you come from a household that's angry, you can't help but, it becomes some part of your conditioning. So recognizing that. So
Yes.
what is the yoga of emotional management telling you? Recognize a hard emotion, turn it into a soft emotion. Why? If I'm angry with somebody or hate somebody, I'm hurting myself. I'm holding that within me. My cells are getting affected. So as soon as you see a negative emotion, and identifying the emotion is really key. And so the emotional management of yoga talks about using the technique to move from the negative to the positive. And what happens is, rather than playing either the victim or some kind of positioning that you take to be able to understand that dynamic, you become the witness. And
Yeah.
you say, that's giving rise to this in me. And like you said, pause and look at it and say, try and see, where did it come from? And when we go back to the source, let's say as a child, you were scared of the dark, and every time something kind of dark pops up, it triggers you. So when you go back, it's like learning to identify the entire circuit
Mm.
and making it no longer active. So that's what emotional management does.
Yes.
And the last one is really meditating upon, who am I? What makes me tick? What are my moods? So when you start seeing that, and then just asking yourself, can I really be happy with what I have? Finding little moments of joy, whether it's like eating something tasty,
Mm. Mm.
and walking in the open, simple things of life. So
Yeah.
that's what the Jnana Yoga does for you. So this is
Mm.
like a summation of the major streams. There are many streams because this has been researched for
Mm.
thousands of years.
Yes. And I
This
think,
would be what would be needed for
yes,
people.
and I think this will be very valuable to our listeners because many won't be aware of these different branches and how each work with each other, and they're important all together. And because I know we've talked about this a lot, but yoga is not exercise. Just too many yoga studios that's what it's all about. So it's very refreshing, and I'm very grateful for you sharing that with us today. What I'd like to sort of delve into now is the relationship between yoga and nutrition. So, nutrition is part of yoga, and I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
So in yoga, we say we don't nurture ourselves only with the food.
No.
It's called, nutrition is called as ahara, which means everything that you feed yourself, even mentally,
Mm.
in terms of things you see maybe on Instagram or as a movie or a series. So all of that contributes to nutrition.
Mm.
And when we come specifically down to food, just like we have in a plug point three sockets, a positive, a negative, and neutral, the foods are classified in these three manners of positive, negative, and neutral or uplifting.
Yeah.
So the heavy foods are obviously the processed foods, which are not good for your body, and even modern science attests to that.
Yes.
These foods don't have any life force in them. So, having foods which are rich in their mineral content, vitamin content, all of the things that we look at in modern terms, we look at it from the yoga perspective of saying, do they have prana, life in them?
Yeah.
So anything that's out of a packet, obviously, is not really good for you. Then we have another set, which is the very activating foods, which is like the meats, onions, and garlic. Now, those are needed for people who have extremely active lives,
Mm.
where they need to be on the go. Like people who are working a corporate job or maybe athletes, they need the meat, they need the protein. Protein is required as per yoga, but not in it's not such a big thing in yoga. It's, however, looking at foods that calm you down, like milk.
Mm.
But milk again has been, how do you say it, has had a lot of bad publicity
Yes.
because it's being factory produced, if you want to call it that. In India, there's a specific kind of cow. It's called the Indian cow, and it produces a milk called as A2. So it's specific. So milk from an A2 cow is good. So organic milk, let's say.
Yes.
So milk, locally grown foods, anything that's fresh off the earth, produced in a manner which is, because everything gets imbued with that prana, the imprint. Imagine a woman cooking a meal really angrily. She's putting anger into the food. So you see, in yoga, we don't just look at
Mm.
what's on the plate.
No.
We look at how you come to the plate, how the
Yeah.
food gets to your table, how you put it in, and how you digest it. And
Yeah.
if you feel a sense of, and this is very important,
Mm.
fulfillment. It's called tripti. When you feel, like when you've had a really nice meal, there's this
Mm.
feeling of absolute, so every cell in your body, it's like being bathed in this feeling of a bliss of
Yes.
being nurtured.
That's exactly the word I was thinking of too, was bliss. That, when you eaten the food that has been prepared with love, you've eaten just enough, not too much, and you do feel nourished. It's a wonderful feeling. Just
Yes.
before I forget, your comment on the dairy foods is quite relevant, and certainly the other aspect to them, and this is coming from the Western research, is that traditionally dairy foods were fermented. So you would have had yogurt, you would have had cheese, you wouldn't necessarily have drank the milk because we didn't have refrigerators. You couldn't keep the milk fresh. So I think this is an important thing, when we look at food, and I like to do this as a Western trained dietitian, is look at, well, traditionally, how did we eat these foods? And of course, we're sort of starting to understand from the Western science that the fermentation of the dairy products changes the way the body digests and metabolizes the nutrients from the dairy foods. So yeah, very interesting because again, we forget we didn't have refrigerators, so many things were
Yes.
either fermented, sometimes salted, which was not necessarily the best for our longer term health, or prepared fresh because we couldn't store the food long term. So it's not always possible to cook everything from scratch, but I certainly
Yeah.
encourage my clients to have as much as possible, the fruits, the vegetables, the whole grains, and having them as fresh and locally grown as possible.
True.
Yeah.
About dairy, yes, the fermented ones and that the ones that haven't been radiated have the live bacteria which are good for the gut.
Yeah.
So, like in India, there's the tradition of setting your yogurt at night, It's like in every Indian home, a pot of yogurt is
Yes.
made in the night, set for the next day.
Yes.
And another very important thing which Ayurveda and yoga subscribe to is ghee, which is the fat that comes out of churning the cream to get the butter, and then out of that, it's boiled down to become ghee,
Mm.
which is supposed to be required. Again, cholesterol has been given a bad name. Fats sometimes have a bad name, but it's not that you're having an extreme amount. It's like
That's
a teaspoon or a tablespoon a day to make sure that the insides of your body are oleated as well as your nerves, because your nerves
right.
have fat. The
Mm.
myelin
That's right.
around, the myelin
That's
sheath around your nerve is
exactly.
fat.
Yeah.
And the molecule, and you can check this out, the
Mm.
molecule of ghee is
Mm.
the closest to the fat molecule around the nerve cells. So
Mm.
that's why a lot of people, as they get older, the bodies dry up. It's a vata phase in life. You need
Yes.
the ghee. You
Yes.
need the ghee to keep, the nerves moving, the
Yeah.
body in its optimal functioning.
Yes. And I know even with the Western research, there was a lot of confusion about cholesterol because we knew it had such important roles in, our nerve cell, the myelination of the nerve cells and so forth. So I feel, yeah, Western science has a little bit more research there to understand the best nutrients to support the nervous system in that way. But I'm glad you mentioned the gut because I was so excited. It was about it's probably around 2010, 2012 when a lot of the Western research was starting to come to life about the gut microbiome. And of course, the problems that they had faced before then was actually how to study the microbiome without them dying, because as soon as the microbes were exposed to oxygen, they died. And I was just so excited by this research because in Ayurveda and traditional medicine from Tibet and China, very much is all about the health of the gut, and all illness and health stems from the gut. So I was excited to see that connection between Western nutrition and Eastern nutrition as well. And I know from a seminar I just attended last week online that they're starting to understand that post digestion or post metabolism effect of nutrients now, which is quite new to Western science, which is very exciting. From your understanding and your knowledge of yoga, does yoga actually help us make better food and nutrition choices?
That would definitely be a yes, because we start from the body and we recognize what is happening in the body. As that process becomes more and more harmonized, like you're kind of bringing them together, your body will tell you what it wants to eat
Yeah.
as well.
Mm.
When you feel a little low, maybe a fruit, you need to be grounded. You can have like a yogurt, something that's heavier. So
Yeah.
it starts guiding you. So yoga effectively allows your intelligence,
Mm.
innate intelligence. We think intelligence came in from the academics. It didn't. The plants never went to school. The dogs never went to school. The animals never went to school. Your horses, I'm sure, never, I mean, were school, but they didn't go to an academic school. So
Yeah.
there is an innate intelligence built into every species that's created, and nature has a lot of intelligence in it.
Mm.
And what yoga is allowing you to do is override what has been perhaps a social construct and kind of got snowballed into something because it's about body image and food, and then again, like we talked about the myths about the dairy industry, it's like it has to be churned around a little bit so that then you can generate a new way of consumption. So really sticking to even traditional systems of understanding
Mm.
are also helpful because these campaigns tend to confuse the human mind. What yoga is doing is asking you to go back to your authentic source and see what you really feel like eating,
Yes.
understand what it is that you need. So it allows you to
Mm.
make more conscious choices
Mm.
and give your body and mind what it needs.
Yes, yes. And also, I think from both the physical and the mental aspects or benefits of yoga, that supports our digestive system. It also decreases our day-to-day stress levels. And so many of my clients have shared with me that when they stress less, they eat less as well, in terms of that stress eating. So it's very powerful in that way, of making us sort of, yeah, be running on, how could I say, be running without the heightened cortisol levels is probably what I'm really saying.
And that's so true. So it's if you eat and with awareness and in the moment, your cells are getting happier, the cortisol is coming down.
Yeah,
And it's a whole bunch of it's a domino, right? It's making you feel better
yeah,
rather than making and recognizing that all cultures across the world, eating was so central to celebrating, you
yeah.
know, and and we can't condemn that and we can't
Mm.
remove it from our lives. We
No.
can find ways to make it, honor it, and make it a way of a renewal. We're kind of
Yeah,
renewing the energies, what we have spent,
yeah.
really looking at it like that.
Yeah. And we've touched on this a little bit in terms of that practice of mindful eating, that, pausing before we eat and being aware of the eating experience. And I truly believe that's what helps our digestive process and for us to extract as much nourishment out of the food. And we were talking about the meals that provide that bliss feeling. And that's not just
True.
about the nutrients, that's that whole experience of the food we've eaten, how it's been prepared, how we've eaten it, perhaps we shared it with loved ones.
I'd like to
And
redefine it and call it the ritual of nourishing yourself.
yeah, yeah. And so many people that I work with, they may take care preparing the food, but then they don't eat with awareness. They don't taste their food. They don't savor it. It's nearly like a chore. Oh, I've got to eat now. So it tends to be, we have this saying in Australia, shovel it in, and it just goes do do do, which is not great for our digestive system. It's certainly not great for our enjoyment of food or that extraction of nourishment. And
Even in yoga, there are small things like sit down when you eat,
oh
you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Even when you drink water, sit down and drink water.
yes, yeah,
These are things which are just speeding us up. So it's all calling to that, not being on cruise control on a highway, but
yeah.
just being in the moment and going about life at a pace that's comfortable and also slowing down to receive the nutrition.
Yes. Ah, definitely. And I love that saying that, comes from Eastern nutrition, is sort of like where our focus is where the energy goes. So if we really want to get the most benefit from what we're eating, then we eat without distraction and let the body extract what it needs from the food that we've eaten. But there's numerous things that people do when they eat. They watch TV, they scroll through social
Worst thing
media.
to do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So just that encouragement, Food is worth stopping for and savoring, is what I'd like to say, I think.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
yoga completely agrees with that. It says breathe as well. And
Yes.
get aware of the senses.
That's right.
See if there's more, if your mouth is more moist because it's expecting to,
Yeah,
it's like when you have dogs, they get so
I know.
excited, you know. I mean, they're in their natural skin and they're
Yes.
so happy.
Yeah.
And, oftentimes the dog will come back to you and say, I've eaten and be so happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's so instinctive, and we've kind of just put this entire thing on it, which takes away the joy of it.
That's right. That's right. But I love how we've been able to explore yoga today, Malti, from that holistic picture of yoga, the way it was always meant to be. And as I said, I can still remember that aha moment when I was in India at Ananda and I thought, this is what yoga's about. It's not about the postures and the mirrors, it's about a way of life. And it's been lovely to explore this with you for the International Day of Yoga. Is there anything you would like to say before we finish up?
Yeah, I'd like to add about how Ananda gives this, it's a culmination of all these various traditional sciences, and it's a very special place. It's kind of discovering that there are more ways of being authentic and in tune with yourself. So I would definitely like to say that Ananda gives you that experience and adds so much richness that you can take back into your life.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I would like to add to this entire
Yeah.
conversation.
Yes, my experiences of Ananda have all been very positive, and each time I have taken away a new learning and something that I have been able to practically implement in my life, but also share with my clients, which means it has a far reaching effect as well. And I'll make sure that I've got the website here, I'll also leave the Instagram handle and the Bihar Yoga website
That's the
details
traditional
with this.
system, yes.
Yeah,
Follow that, Anand.
with
Yeah,
the episode's notes. So all of those contact details will be in the notes for this episode. So
lovely.
thanks again for sharing with me today. I have found it very beneficial, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. So thanks again, Malti, for joining us.
It's my pleasure to
Yes.
meet you and have a wonderful conversation. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's been, like I said, my pleasure as well. So thanks again. And for all of our listeners and viewers, if you have enjoyed this episode, please let us know and share the link on your social media pages. You have been listening to the Eating for You podcast with Sally Ann Pisk. If a long-term way of healthier eating is of interest to you, then make sure you subscribe to our podcast.